Hi, good morning, everybody. Thank you very much for joining me this morning. We're going to be looking at lesson number 2 and the importance of our base plan creation. That's the main event that we're going to be looking at. Of course, the assignment has 2 parts, and we're going to also be looking at the client survey and actually how important that is. But in terms of some guidance today, I think the base plan is going to be the main event. So what I think I will do is just switch share screen here. All right. Cool. Okay, so let's take a brief look at the lesson 2 discussion board. And if anybody has any questions, don't hesitate to throw them in the chat. The other thing that we will do is take a look at the Q&A document. I'll actually throw that in the chat here as well. So if anybody has, let me see where it is. There we are. Okay. So there is our Q&A document. And it looks like we have a couple questions in there today. That's great. So feel free, if you wish, to place your question in the Q&A document. I'll make sure that I put a text answer in there. So that's often a great place to stick questions, because often, you know, in a class this size, the odds are other people are going to have the same questions. So that can be very helpful to them. Let's take a look at lesson 2 here. So the big thing here is the base map, and this is you know, a big part of the permaculture and any land design process is you want to get as accurate a base plan together as you can get. And when I say accurate, it's obviously to scale, but I also mean that we want to include as many significant items that the site has on it as possible on the plan. So that would include, you know, property lines and walkways and patios, the building footprint, any auxiliary buildings. We want to definitely be mindful of all the utilities coming in and out of the dwelling or dwellings, along with some other things like fencing, and significant plants as well. So we're going to take a look at a couple examples, which should be quite helpful. And we can also take a look on lesson 2 assignment discussion board here. There's a good explanation of what we're looking at for the base plan and what you're going to want to include. So my suggestion is whenever you are putting out any kind of a design sheet, you want to make sure you always have that title block going, which would contain the project name, the site, and your name, the address, and certainly the date. That's an important one. And we can get into that a little bit later, why that's important. North arrow is also very important, along with some sort of scale. And we'll take a look at that a little bit later. Some structures, you know, the roof configuration, that's also really helpful. That'll be quite helpful when we get into lesson 5, when we're looking at water. And we've got roads and pathways. So as you can see, there's a lot of different things that we want to consider. Now, contour lines, that's also a nice item to include. You might not be able to find any for your project site initially, but we'll go over today some of the places that we can get contour information, albeit maybe not that accurate, but at least you'd have some guidelines there. We have fencing and waterways. So as you can see, there's a lot of things that we want to consider. And let me just go down a little lower. Then we have our SWOT analysis. So that is pretty straightforward, I think, the elements that we're looking for. So really what we want to do is get a snapshot of your project site as it sits right now, okay? And with all of these different elements. And then that is going to create a wonderful sort of foundational layer for all of our design layers that are going to go on top of it. The other thing that we want to do that's more straightforward is the client survey. And you'll notice in the rubric here that the client survey and the base map are both worth quite a bit in terms of their points. So they're both equally important. And I would agree, when you are engaged by a client, you certainly want to make sure that you are dialed into what their needs are and what they're after, because this is their landscape and not yours. That's how we look at it anyways. When I say we, I mean my wife and myself. So let us take a look at, we can take a look at the template file itself. And we'll just go down to that base plan. There we go. So this is the starting point. And the nice thing here, if we zoom out a little bit, we will see that we have some tutorials, right? So there's tutorials all the way around the slide. That might be very helpful for you. As well, we have some examples here. So let us take a look at those. So here's a student's example, and this is quite a good one. We have the project site, and then it's nice to use either red or yellow as a property line boundary. And you may have a really accurate property line that you can use. Oops, I'm not sure why I did that. You may have to also guess slightly. And for this class and this exercise, you're not going to be too worried about its exact location. If you were doing this for a client, you would be doing all you can to make sure that you have a really good idea of the property boundary. Just in case you decide you're putting some elements outside of it, you certainly don't want to do that. And as well, when we're looking at fencing, that sort of thing. So some of the elements that are included here that are really good, that you can consider with your own project site, is we have the project boundary, but we also have some information outside of the project boundary, which is great for context. So we have the road that is labeled. That's a really nice touch. The driveway coming into the property. We have the actual building footprint here with the roof lines. And then we have a bunch of existing trees and shrubs. And in this case, they've actually identified them and labeled them. Well, I do not know why that's doing that. Okay, I'll make sure I stay away from that. You don't necessarily have to identify all of these right out of the gate, but certainly putting in a symbol representing your existing plants is a great idea. The nice thing about this method here is having a legend beside your base plan for this class is a smart move. And the reason I say that is, if you were to, instead of having a legend, if you were to label all of these elements, that would look great, right? But as soon as we start overlaying this with other layers, like looking at water and plantings and any access, it's going to get harder and harder to read if you have these labels underneath, right? So having a legend makes a lot of sense. We have services coming in and out here. I don't know if they're legend, but that's what it looks like here. Looks like power coming in. And what else? And of course we have contour information. And not only that, we have labels on the contours that are showing us the difference in elevation between the contour lines. So that is a nice thing to do. Otherwise, if these labels weren't here, we wouldn't know whether this was a high point, which it is, or perhaps would be a low point. So we do need a little bit of information as to the elevations there. So that is one example, which I think is a good one. The property boundary, that could be a solid line or you could dash it. Either one is fine. And of course, they've shown some water flows here. That's great. That's very, very nice, nice base plan. As well, you'll also notice here, they have sort of an outline, this dashed line here, and this has been colored, so it's a light green. So in their legend, that is a mixed forest. So instead of having to place all these individual tree symbols, they've just gone with like this cloud effect. And that is totally reasonable to do. And I would encourage you to do that rather than trying to put each and every tree symbol in there. So yeah, I don't think there's anything else I want to add to that. Here is a hand-drawn example. It's a little trickier to read just because of the resolution. And this is kind of where I was going with my previous comment about using a legend versus labeling. Because there's all these labels around the edge, when we go to overlay some new ideas with this site, these are going to become quite distracting. So if there's any way you can put your base plan together so that there's no labels or minimal labels, I think you'll be happier with sort of your graph on a graphical standpoint with your work as you go forward. So that that is something to consider there. Let's see. I don't know if there's another example on this sheet. That's a nice thing about the slides. You always have some examples here you can reference as well as tutorials. Let me just show you an example that we've been working on. We have a reasonably new project and just show you what our base plan looks like. This is a fairly, it's about a 7-acre parcel. And you can see we have a property boundary here. We have topographic info. So we have these topo lines and they're labeled. You have to zoom in quite a bit. And these are 1 foot contour lines. We have a wet area there, have a road coming in, and we have this building footprint. We're not showing a roof line there. That's not something that we do with our initial base plans. They have a riding ring and a little barn and stuff. So pretty basic, and a fence line. And this has actually taken us quite a while to put together. So these are sort of mixed alder and maple around the edge here and a few little wet spots. So that's kind of our starting point in this design, is just to get this as accurate as we can. So as we go forward, we know we're not doing anything that's conflicting with an existing element. Yeah, so that's just kind of an example of, now for us, we got all this topographic information from a drone survey, and we also got a high definition drone image. Should show up here. There it is. And we can turn that off. So there's our image that we started with. And we have a site model below it. So we can actually, we've projected this high definition image onto a 3D model, which it has no height, right? The model has height, but the image doesn't, but it's mainly for reference. It's not really something that we are going to do, but as you can see with a drone image, we can zoom in pretty good and get pretty high definition, right? These are little chickshaws, so to speak. These are portable chicken units. So that's one advantage of drone imagery. If you're having to map out larger spaces and you have some open area, they do really well with open area and not so well with wooded. So, all right, we can go through that, and maybe what we'll do is just take a look back at the lesson here. Does anybody have any questions they would like to ask regarding the base plan creation? You can certainly drop it in the chat if you want, or we will take a look at the Q&A here shortly. I just want to do a quick review on the client survey. So let's do that. There we go. All right. So, oh, we do have a question here in the chat. I've lost my chat box for some reason. There we are. Okay. So Carrie has a question here just before we keep going. What program do you suggest for creating the base plan in? Well, that is a really good question. And I wouldn't necessarily recommend you use the software that I'm using. It's expensive and probably take a good 6 months to learn. So that's one of the things you want to consider is we don't want you to spend the whole class learning the software. We really want to have that as an easy instrument to depict your design ideas, but we really want you to focus on the permaculture design process. So some of the easier steps forward, if you had, Carrie, if you had an iPad and a pencil, one of the better low-cost softwares is called Morpheo Trace. Oh, I think I spelled that wrong. There you go. And I have this on our iPad. We don't really use it for designing so much as kind of very rough ideas, right? So we'll import something onto Morpheo Trace and we can augment it a little bit. But for somebody starting out, this is a really good approach, and especially if you already have an iPad and a pencil. This software, I think it's only like $30. It's really low cost annual subscription, and it does a nice job. You can scale the drawing, you can you have all sorts of different symbols that you can use. There is a little learning curve, but for any of those people out there that want to do design work beyond the course, this might be a really good first step. Some of you have some graphics abilities already, so that you'll probably be using whatever you're comfortable with. If you don't want to utilize any CAD or computer aided drawings at all, you're quite welcome to do all of your work by hand and just scan it or take an image of your work. That's completely fine. There's some, there's no doubt some of the hand drawings that I've seen are just absolutely stunning. And yeah, they look very, very nice. I can't do those. I've never, well, I started with computer CAD myself, so that's kind of what I've got myself locked into. But yeah, so those are a couple of examples. Hopefully that helps you out, Carrie. And please let me know if you want some other examples. There is, if we go, sorry, I'm just going to another page here. If we go to the modules section, when you log in, you'll notice there is, in the start here, there should be graphics and software tutorials and some mapping resources. So you might want to check those out. Those might be super helpful. All right, so Hollis has a question. Do you have any resources on where we can find contour? Yes, I do. So one of the things that, if you cannot find, okay, so one of the things you could do is go to a local, say you're in a regional district or town or part of state you're in, they may have what's called an ArcGIS interactive mapping system, and they certainly do where I live. And they're often called an interactive map. And these are GIS based. And a lot of them will have contour information on them. I'm not going to dive into this one. You can also get other GIS info off of this. And they're all a little different. They're similar but different, but they basically will give you a layer where you can apply or show contour information on right here. You can see I can get 2 meter contour data, which, 2 meters, that's, not great. That's getting close to, it's a little more than 6 feet. And if it was a very large site, I suppose it would be okay. So these tend to be very, low resolution, but they are something. So let's say you have your project site and you want to get slightly better contour data. You can go to what's called Contour Map Creator. Now, I wouldn't use this for any projects, for clients, but for this course, it is extremely helpful. So let's say we just zoom in here and we'll pretend this is our project site. You have some settings here that are quite easy. So what we want to make sure is it's probably want to be on imperial or American units, and set the interval for the contours. So let's say we're going to make them 1 foot contours. And then once we have that set up, we just click in one top corner and then in the other. So we have our little window of where we want the data, and then we just ask it to get data. And then here we go, we got a little legend on the right-hand side, and we have our contours. So we could take a screenshot of that, and we could place it within, or our base plan. It could be when we take images, we can control the opacity. So we could dull this out a little bit, but just show those contour lines. We could also trace those lines if we wanted to. So there's a couple of ways that we can use that. But that is quite often what people will have to use especially when we get to lesson 5, because we want to have reasonable contour intervals when we look at predicting how water's going to flow on the project site and off the site as well. So you can see here, this is a high point, so that if this was my project site, water might actually have the ability to move onto my project site from over here. And that's kind of where we're going to go in lesson 5. So the contour information does tell us a lot. Like right here, if this was our project site, we know that we have a high point that slopes and heads out to the road here. So again, this is kind of the resource of that has the least amount of accuracy, but it is pretty easy to operate. So I would consider that if you can't find any elsewhere. And I will show you, I'll get another software going here while I'm running through these questions, and we can show you another resource. So the next question here, hopefully that helps you out, Hollis. B says here, is there a good resource for collecting vectors of contour lines? I think I know what you mean there. Yeah, you're going to have like ultimately what you want to be able to do in a perfect world is find contour data and just import it into your work and have it all scaled and it's all tickety-boo. And that's essentially what we can do when we're using Vectorworks Landmark. That's what we use, because we're bringing in what's called a shape file, and it's all geo-referenced. And I'm not going to get into that, but it does make it's complicated, but it makes it easy for us to get it into our drawing. Do you want to just elaborate on that, B? Do you mind just unmuting yourself? And that would be super helpful if you don't mind. I don't know if I can't hear you. I'm not sure who B is. Ah, there we are. Are you there, B? Okay, we'll come back. We will come back to that just to make sure we're getting clarity in that. So Beth had a question. Any resources to help with identifying existing vegetation? Yeah, well, there are a few apps you can get for your phone that will help you identify plant material. I must say I'm really old school in that I started in this career way back before the days of email and internet, and where we had to use books to learn anything about plant ID. So that I have a library full of books, but you don't need that these days. You could certainly, an app would be a good starting point. That is a bit of a loaded question too. Let me show you one resource here. There is a OSU Plant Database, which I have used before. So you can check that out. And it has common and Latin names. Now, this is a great database, it doesn't necessarily make it easy to identify, if that makes sense. You would have to know what you're looking at. But if you do, if you think, oh, it's a maple, then you can at least start there. Now, one of the old school things they used to do is have a plant key where you'd actually look at the plant and there'd be like a checklist you would go through. You know, say with maples, how many lobes it has on its leaf, and it would start to narrow down the actual exact species that you had. But honestly, the whole plant world is so enormous. You know, it took me personally, it took me about a decade of studying, you know, pretty much every day to get a really good knowledge base. At least that, you know, I feel I'm there now. But it took about 10 years for sure. And there's always new plants, new things to learn. But I'd say going with an app is on your phone is a pretty good starting point. But you'll probably find you're just constantly learning new plants. And I may not be the best person to ask that question, given I don't use any of these apps for plant ID. So hopefully that helps. Kevin, your legend is feeling full and you don't have space for adding building names to it. You labeled them on the map. Sure. Well, that's totally fine. In that case, you might want to label the building itself rather than have a call out, if you know what I mean. A call out is kind of what we saw in this example here, where we have some text on the side of the page and then a line pointing to the item. That's what it's called, a call out. So if you want to label buildings, like this person has labeled rooms within the house, which is actually a really good idea. You could certainly do that. That's not a problem at all. Yeah, if you want to show your map, no problem, Kevin. Maybe simplest thing would be to share the link in the chat here. And then I can certainly bring that up. And you've got a separate vegetation map. Yeah. Yeah, and everybody's project site is so different. Sometimes you need, or you feel the need to have multiple sheets. But we'll take a look at that whenever you get a chance. Okay, I see it now. Let's just plop it in here. Okay. So there is your base map. That's looking good. I would say that looks great, Kevin. And then you're identifying your existing plants. Right on. And the grayscale, and yeah, nice work. I don't think you have to, I see what you mean. That's a good idea, having your plants identified on another sheet, because often you'll probably be using this one. And again, it'll be less distracting when you're overlaying. Let's say you're working with the water layer or some sort of water plan. You probably don't want this visible. So that's a good call. Yeah, I would say that's great. No worries there. I hope that helps, Kevin. Let me go back up so I'm not skipping by anybody's question here. Carrie, so would I upload a drone image to Morpheo? That is a really good question. Morpheo Trace, you can import. I'll just grab it here. I don't use it daily. I'll just see what you can import with that. You should be able to import. The only thing I could see being challenging, drone images tend to be very high resolution. So that might be tricky. So what I mean by that is it may be a little too much. Yeah, you can certainly take a screenshot and import image files. So yes, you could easily do that. You just have to make sure the image isn't too large. Okay. So hopefully that helps Carrie. So B, instead of tracing from the contour map, you've now displayed. I see. So you're trying to, yeah. Gets a little bit complicated and probably don't want to go there. But so what we do when we can't, if we don't have drone imagery of a site for whatever reason, we can access LiDAR data that's available for free for parts of the province I live in. And if we use a software called QGIS, we can take that data and manipulate it or filter it, and we can end up with contour data that we can then import into our software. You can do all sorts of things with it. I'll just show you one thing here, but I don't want to overwhelm you either. And I wouldn't advise diving into QGIS. This is a, sorry about that. This is a project site that we imported all this LiDAR data. So this is probably, 100 acres there. And the red boundary is the project. And this particular job was quite incredible. It has a lot of water flowing onto the property, and then it has an elevated rail line at the back that inhibits drainage. So we used QGIS here to figure out basically where the degree of which and where the water was coming from. And yeah, I don't really want to get into too much of this, but this software, if you can learn it, it's just such a game changer. You can see in purple here, that is what we call our micro watershed. We're going to learn more about that in lesson 5. But all these parcels to the west of this one, any runoff that occurs ends up dumping in the bottom of this. So very, very powerful information, but learning the software is really tough. And it will also pump out contours for us like it has here, right? So then we can export them and we can take them into our software that we use. The other thing we can do, which is pretty cool, is just from an information standpoint, we can share that with Google Earth. And let's take a look at an example here. So here's a project we're involved with, and we got a bunch of LiDAR data, so we could create 1-foot contours, and these are all geo-referenced. So we actually click on them and you get the elevation within Google Earth. We can also do all kinds of different projections. In this case, it's giving us this relief look so that we can see all the drainage channels that are in the area. So that's pretty cool. We can do a slope map. We have a slope map and a legend here, and that gives us the degree of slope of the land. So it'll very powerful tool, and it'll provide us with the ability to take contours and easily import them into our work. Saying that, you know, there's hours of work to get to this point, and you know, this may be something you want to consider a little bit later on, not in this course so much, but just as a way of refining, you know, your site analysis and what you do with that. So try not to dump too much on your plate here in one go, other than the fact that we've got base plan to create. And as you learn more and more about doing these, you can refine the graphical portion of it and the information that you have on a project site. So let us go back to the chat, get caught up with some of these questions here. So Brad, I hope that helped. Probably didn't. But for now, one of the things you might want to do, you could trace it, or again, you could take a screenshot and import that onto your drawing and scale it, and then you can change the opacity. That's another way of doing it. That should work fairly well with this platform. Okay, anyways, I think we answered Beth's question there. And Kevin, buildings or a little small to label. Yeah, Kevin, I think what you've done here is great. So I wouldn't worry at all about that. These are helpful to know, and I don't see these distracting you from overlaying it with new information. So I'd say go with that. It looks great. Beth. So Beth's question, you have a site that's pretty blank, and so you don't have a building footprint. Yes, okay. So you definitely want to put in a proposed building footprint. Okay. Yeah, so that you definitely, good question. You definitely want to do that in the base plan. So let's say it was a new property, you or your clients had a new property, they would most likely have an idea where they want to put the house. So just for the sake of this exercise, I would put it where you think it would logically go. Now, by the time we get to the end of the course, you might feel differently about that. That's one of the interesting things with the Regrarian platform. That's a farm scale training program. You can see all the layers they have here from 1 to 10. This is how you go through them, and you can see where buildings are. They're number 6. So unlike a lot of, you know, traditionally when we look at, you know, this has been my experience, when somebody buys a parcel of land, first thing they think about is where to put the house. And in this case, you can see, well, that's well into the mix. We're looking at these other items first. We're looking at geography and water and access and your major plantings before you even start putting buildings on the site. The buildings are a constraint. You can't move. You don't want to. So just a little side note about that. So hopefully that helps you, Beth. Yes, so do put that on the base plan. And B sounds good. Okay, that's great. Right on. So let us just take a look at the questions that are on the Google document here. Make sure we get everybody. So, okay. So Stephen had a question about, yeah, I saw this one the other day. Small apartment, not a lot of resources. Would it be okay to use the patio? Well, it would, sure. I think what you'll find, if somehow you can expand your project site beyond that, maybe even the rooftop is an idea. I've had students that were in apartments that ended up doing the rooftop. You might get a little bit more out of the course in terms of the exercises that we're going to go through, because we're going to look at traffic patterns. We're going to, human traffic patterns through the site. We're going to look at how water behaves and how we might be able to capture and infiltrate that. Now, on a roof, of course, that's a little different. But on a balcony, it would be kind of even miniaturized. So, yeah, Steve, you could definitely use your balcony, but if there's any way you can expand on that, that would be my recommendation. So we'll be following that up with a text answer here. Okay, so Brooke, when are we supposed to include a figure number or title? All right, let's take a look at where you're going here. I see. So I gather what you are getting at here is there's a base map title, and yet we're asking for that down below. Yeah, well, I agree that it should be on the page somewhere, and the logical place for it is normally on the title block. That's where if you're wondering about any information regarding the drawing, this is where you'd be this is where I would initially look. So, you know, I would certainly adopt that as a place to put all of your info, including your name and the date. And the date's important too, because as you do more of this work, if that's what you end up doing after the class, the date's important so you know what's the most current version, because often, and I'll certainly share a lot of our drawings that my wife and myself do with the class, but you'll see that we have a title block, and part of that's a revision little schedule, so we can see whether it is current or not. And it's just a little bit of an expanded expansion on this name and date. It's more the revision and what it's all about. But I would use the title block and get into the habit of that. That's a good practice, Brooke. So hopefully that helps you out. And Sean, viewed. Yeah, well, contour lines, I think we covered that earlier in our chat today. You can certainly get that here from Contour Map Creator. You could find those yourself if you had, let's say you had a laser level and you wanted to go around and plot out that would take quite a while to do, but you could do it manually like that. I would use this kind of a platform, or an interactive map that you may have access to. That would be a good thing to do. And the water flows. Well, I don't want to dive too deep into, no pun intended, into water here, but basically what happens to figure out where the water is flowing, if we looked at Kevin's map here, water is going to flow at a right angle to the contour. Okay, so if we are back here, I can just annotate this without doing any disturbance with Kevin's drawing. So this is a high point. So if we were trying to figure out water flows here and we look at that contour, that's about a right angle there. If we're over here, so that is how you would figure out water flows. It's always going to be a right angle to contour. And again, don't have to worry too much about that now, but that will be coming up when we get to lesson 5, which I warn you is one of the harder assignments, but we give you lots of support going into it, so make it as easy as possible. So yeah, don't worry too much about your water flows, but again, you can get those contour information where I mentioned. The information I have available isn't detailed enough, and I can't get the contour map creator to work. Well, sometimes the contour map creator, and this may be sort of after the fact. I don't know if Sean is on our call today or not. Let's see. I don't think so. Okay. So I'll reference the earlier part of the recording today for Sean, because you may find that this is troublesome, and it's often, if you're using, let's say you're using Firefox, it doesn't always work. So just try using a different browser, and that should help you out. I don't have issues with it, although I have had with Firefox. So that's one thing to keep keep in the back of your mind. Okay, those are the questions from our Q&A. And I don't think we have any more in the chat there. What I was going to just briefly show you, I'll bring up an example of our questionnaire, because we haven't really talked about that. And for a lot of you that are doing project sites that might be your own property, you might think, oh, this is kind of silly. Sorry, I'm just trying to get. There we go. I'll just switch screen here, and we'll just take a quick peek at this. This is one of, and we'll get into this more, excuse me, but our process involves a client filling in our questionnaire as soon as they contact us, basically. We'll have them fill this in. We will then have a what we call a good fit call, where we'll have a brief phone meeting with them, and we'll review this document and just make sure we're a good fit for one another. And then we will arrange to go have a site meeting with them. But this is a really important tool, and we will build on this and often reference back to it during the course, or sorry, during the design phase for us. And it's really, there's some key parts to this, and nobody ever fills this in. Basically, what's your budget? Very important. If you're building a house, you'd need to know. If you're building a landscape, people tend to not know. So that is probably one of the hardest things to do, is make sure you're not designing the Taj Mahal for somebody. Asking about their dream property. These are similar but different than what you have on your questionnaire, but this is basically what we do, and we want to know what's there and what they'd like. And it's kind of a big picture to start with, and then their vision, and they can attach any images. So it is a really important step in the design process. So again, if it's your project site and it's your property, it may feel that this whole process is a little bit silly, but it isn't, even for yourself. But when we get to working for others, it's vital that we know what it is they want. And then having a little bit of a background information is a great idea. And you do tend to get a feel for who the decision makers are, although we specifically asked that. So this part of the template file we have for single client, and this would be for multiple. And then some very straightforward questions regarding inventory. And then, yeah, more inventory stuff. And then, what do they like? What don't they like? And these are really simple, but vital questions for you as a designer to figure out what you're having to do here, because people do not call you because they have a perfect landscape, right? There is some reason that they're calling you, and it's usually some problem that they can't work through. So that is hopefully what gets documented, and you certainly do want to know what they like and want to perhaps enhance with their site. So yeah, so that's a little bit about that. Please make sure that you do check the rubric out and that all of the information that we're asking for is included, because basically this is what I use to grade your assignments. And then of course I'll give you some feedback on that. And I prefer video feedback, so hopefully everybody's going to enjoy that process. Yeah, I think we're about done for today, unless there's anybody who'd like to ask any additional questions. Totally open to that. We got a minute or two left, so please feel free to pop that in the chat, or you can unmute yourself, whatever your preference is. And just close a few windows here. But the reality, if I can just say it as we're winding up today, and you might be getting this sort of sense now, but you're going to be learning this design protocol, right? The step-by-step protocol to go through with permaculture design. And at the end, you'll probably feel you've got this great toolbox to work with, but this will probably get refined over time for you. As you go through and do more and more work, you either want to improve the graphical end using different techniques or software, or you'll want to incorporate different ideas, different ways of, for myself and my wife, and I'll definitely share some of that with you in future meetings, is just what we provide our clients, and it'll be a little bit different than what you are doing with the template file here, and similar but different, right? So we really focus on water and access and soil layers, as well as sector mapping and other things that get done here, but we don't end up, as we do here, with 150 plus pages of information, right? We couldn't do that. We could do that. It would just take a long time. And part of all of that template file is the educational end of it, but at the end of it, you could take this template file and refine it and kind of distill it down to pieces that you feel are really valuable to provide for your clients. So we'll be going through all that for you. Yeah, so that was a great meeting. Thank you very much, everybody, for joining me here today. And if there isn't any other questions, we will call it a day, and look forward to seeing all of your work next week. So yeah, well, thank you very much, everybody. And again, if you run into any trouble during the week, don't hesitate to drop me a note. You can either put that in right up here in our help, general help up at the top here. I keep my eye on that. I want to try and keep my eye on everything. I'm not on this platform every day, right? But I would check it every day. Well, that doesn't make sense, does it? I'm not active on here grading papers every day, but if there's something in the general help, I try and address that as soon as possible. So if you do get stuck, you can try that. You can also hit the inbox icon and pop me a note if that works better for you. So either one is great, and thank you again, and have everybody have a great week. So we'll see you all later. Thanks again for joining me.